We're on like 3 different
screens
here. I'm like getting dizzy. Hopefully life is not getting you dizzy, but I think I started here on Facebook Live and as well as Instagram, I think for the first time, so I'm experimenting here.
Okay.
You asked me to bring something.
Yeah, I asked you to bring 2 of your books. First of all, I just wanted to say this, that there are days when I don't feel like being here, but because my wife rewards me with date night after this, I'm here. So I just...
Oh, what are you kidding? That's a reward for me.
This just came out. My wife, of course, has written...
This was actually at a...
What is that? Soulmate.
Wait, you didn't see all the hearts.
Oh, I see it.
I love my soulmate.
So, my wife, of course, who is an author of many, many, many books, over 40 as I understand, in several languages, this one just came out, and it's olive-based Tanya, and it's for children, but I would argue that, and as it explains in the very beginning, that it has essentially 3 levels. One, just learning the olive base with a kind of symbolic meaning. So it's easier for a child, I think, to learn Aleph when it's connected to Haluf Shala of Oilam, or Ava. And so my wife has taken specific words from Tanya, and it's really extraordinary. And the second level is Tanya words built on those letters, and that's where they really begin to focus on Ava, Bina, Gvura, Uchule. And then the third level is Tanya concept built on those words. And this is where it really can impact the teacher of the child. So the parent, the big sister, big brother, I would hope that it was the parents that would sit in around this, because there's a lot here that many Yidden don't understand about the power of Tanya, and certainly Hasidim, and even Lubavitchers, who learn Tanya or learn Tanya, but it doesn't quite sink in. And one of the specialties, if I can say so, of my wife, and anyone who's gone through her books or listened to her lectures, especially with the meditations, knows that it draws down Hasidus to a level of implementation. So you have Chochma, Bina, and then Das. Das is that bringing it down into kind of an engineer's level. And the second book, because I was mentioning this to her just the other night, is this book, Let's Go Camping. Now this happened to be the first book that we did, yes?
Well, it was along 2 other ones. I did 3 one time. It was the first Hasidic book. I was just actually telling the story to the class.
Right, and the drawings are kind of our family, as it were. But you can see, right,
oh, not me, some of the kids.
There's my wife and our 2 children, Hanale and Yechesko. But this book, which was really the beginning of the whole process, is something else. It's Let's Go Camping and Discover Our Nature. So what does it do? It goes through a process of a young family getting ready and then going camping and going out into the wilderness. Happened to be that when my wife and I were first married, before we had children, I would take her up into the Adirondacks and we would go camping for days, sometimes.
Mammoth Mountains also.
Also Mammoth and the White Mountains. Right, that's where we went. We went to California, the Mammoth. I took Yechesko when he was old enough to the Adirondacks. And you go up there for a week longer, and you take your fishing pole, because if you didn't catch fish, you didn't eat. And you'd find roots and berries, and it was an experience. But what the book does is takes children along on this family adventure, and in each area, it draws out something which is both a musar, an ethics, just being out in the fresh air. If you look here and you see the kids and the mother are experiencing a flower that the leaves can blow in the wind, and it's titled The Puff and the Element of Air. And then what it does is it takes the air element, right? In Hasidus and in the Tanya, we speak about the Arba Yesodis, the 4 elements. And each Yesod speaks to a personality trait or a midah. And it can be used for good, and it can be used for lehefech zeh. But it goes through, and each one setting up the camp is part of the process, and with creating a fire. So you have the fire element. You have the Tati, that handsome man who's myself.
Very handsome.
And with the sun, and talking about the earth. You can see the earth. So it goes through the Arba Yesodis, obviously, Daimim, Avir, Esh, and Ruach. And each one speaks to a kind of personality, and it teaches the child that there are these elements of their personality, and everyone has some of all of them. Some people have dominant elements or dominant element, and it can express itself in a productive way and the opposite. But it shows that you have the koach. If, for example, you're a, God forbid, a lazy person, so that's, or stubborn, that's daimon, that's inorganic matter, that's earth. But what do we find? And you learn in this sefer. So the child who's always being told, oh, you're lazy, the parent, the teachers say you didn't do your homework, and you gotta have more commitment, et cetera, et cetera. But what the child learns from this is that same element that encourages me to be lazy, God forbid, I can tap into through Hasidus, and it'll make me strong, indefatigable. Right? I can be committed to something and I won't stop. Stubborn can be good when it's used for limud, right? Just like we know in the Gemara, it teaches, right? So, kina, jealousy, is not a good thing. Kina soifrim, being jealous of someone's learning so that one is empowered to learn more, can be a positive and productive thing. And what these books and all the books, Reaching New Heights series, do is take concepts, right, and brings it down to a kind of practical level and then an instructional level. So it's just not a bunch of words that you hear and repeat. And I can sit and learn with many Hasidim, and they can even run circles around me in the Hasidic discourse. But the question is, are they applying it, right? So what is Hasidus? Hasidus takes concepts, comes from Kabbalah, obviously, all comes from Nigga, comes from Torah. But from there it goes into the Panemius, right? The Torah, the Nigga is the Chitzonius of Torah. Do this, don't do that. Do this, don't do that. Here's our history. Here's what happened to the Avos. Here's what happened to Moshe, v'chule, v'chule. But Kabbalah says there's an inward aspect. There's a deep meaning, metaphysical meaning, transcendent meaning in Torah, in these halachas, in these stories. So what are they? So Kabbalah begins to develop those concepts, and there's 2 types of Kabbalah, right? So there's the Kabbalah of theory, about the spheres, about the tzimtzum, Seder Shtalshus, all of these matters. Then there's Kabbalah Masi, which is, using the secrets of Kabbalah, the mysteries of the world to change the physical world. Hasidus, certainly Lubavitch, Chabad Hasidus, tends not to deal with Kabbalah Masi. We tend not to focus on, saying certain words to change certain things. That's not our shtick, is to use the concepts. But then Hasidus, what does Hasidus do? Hasidus takes these very lofty concepts of spheres and ilavalul and on, and then brings them down into a practical level. And of course, why the Alter Rebbe says that it's something that's far and near, right? Near and far. So one of the things that I just am impressed with every time I go back and look at this farm, and I was driven to do so by this Olive Beit Tanya book that just came out. And anyone who has children or has grandchildren or has friends that have children that doesn't have this book in their house is missing something special. And I say that unequivocally, notwithstanding that it's my wife. And I also think of all the other books and all the children's books, this is another one that you have to have. And it's good for, I think, especially for teenagers. So there's another sefer coming out. I don't know if it's still a site, but it's on the Beis HaMikdash, and that's going to be revolutionary, I think, as well, because it brings all the kelim of the Beis HaMikdash and the Beis HaMikdash b'fnei atzmo, and literally turns it inside out in Hasidus, so that it is the person, and how to apply each one of those kelim and the Beis HaMikdash itself into an instructional manual. Because all of Torah, right? What do we say? And I apologize for going on, but
oh, go on.
what do we say? So the Rambam says that the whole purpose of Torah is Oiseh Shalom B'Mraimov, to bring peace to the world, right? That if it didn't or couldn't do that, it wouldn't serve its ultimate end. Hasidus takes that notion. If you understand what we really mean by Oseh Shalom B'Mraimov, the base Roimov, I won't go into all that now, but Hasidus takes that, and the Rebbe brings it down to the Midrash, which is now famous, that Hashem is Mis'ave, has an appetite, created the world, Lasot Dira B'Tachtonim, to make this place a dwelling place for the Eibishter. But what does that mean? Create a dwelling place for the Eibishter. You make it holy? I mean, for what end? Right? Holiness, Kedusha, is the true Shalom. Kedusha is a condition in which there is so much infusion of light, of holiness, of the lack of hidchalkiyot, the lack of machlokes, the lack of taiva, the lack of...
Machlokes is the people not getting along, but there's a word for it. What is machlokes? In English. I know what it is, but like, how do you say it in English?
I would say lack of argumentation, lack of disputes. Right?
Disputes, yeah.
And where emes is so palpable that, because what does the word shalom mean? Shalom, we say it's peace, but what is the root? The word is shalom. It's a completeness. There is peace when there's completeness. And we see that in physics, right? And we know physics is true because we see it from Hasidus. But what physics says is, if something is complete, if it's whole, then it stays that way. That's the law of inertia, until something else comes and disturbs it. If something isn't in equilibrium, it will struggle to try to find that equilibrium. But something that is mole, that is shalom, that is complete, that is full, will remain exactly where and how it is until some outside force imposes itself on that object and changes it. So the essence of any effort in Hasidus, especially for children, but goodness gracious, for adults as well, has got to be, how do you understand Hasidus at the instructional level? Because if it isn't going to make you shalom, if it isn't going to bring you peace, then it isn't serving its purpose. Anyway, that's what I had to say for the day.
Wow. Wow. That is so, I'm like really speechless that you shared that. Yeah, absolutely. I feel in this day and age, I don't know, because like I've been a teacher all my life. Since I was even like 10 years old, I was a camp counselor, head camp counselor, and constantly facing the struggles that the children are having, the lack of the instruction of how to really refine their character traits, how to understand what's going on inside so that they can take a deep breath and even try to do anything about it. So that's what drives me to do this work, because I wish I had it when I was a child. And I can't wait till every child has more of this. Unfortunately, this day and age, like I was just on the phone with someone, and it's really a real challenge for parents because, you know, the iPhones and the technology and all that's out there is stealing the attention of our children from the basic structure of learning the way one used to when there wasn't that black box. Remember Rabbi Gedalia was saying how everyone should not have a TV in the house, because imagine you had someone at your door, and inside this black box, gangsters and hoodlums, and you're allowing this box full of the unknown come into your house, and it's literally snatching our children from a very young age. Someone was telling me the 1.5 and 2-year-olds, they're crying and crying to see the phone. You know, not even now, not anymore 4 and 5 years old. So,
well, you know, I have a personal example. First of all, it is fair to say that to be focused on this instructional level of changing oneself for the better, making oneself shalom, making oneself kadosh, so that the arba amos around that person, and then the greater bias, and then the greater shchuna, and the greater concentric circles that encompass a person. It is an effort. It's not something that one can really do just passively. You can do it, some things passively, right? Just living through a Shabbos, you know, maybe not even chas v'shalom, not learning, just kind of maybe just davening, minimum, having the meal, sitting with family. That's a kind of passive, right? Not bringing over Devar Torah, maybe not doing nigunim, whatever it may be. So one can experience Yiddishkeit at a passive level, and it will have an impact. But to make it an active instructional level takes effort. Now, I think when you're properly engaged, it can be an enjoyable, and you feel the productiveness of it, right? It's just like there are days when you exercise and you don't feel like it. You know you got to do it, so you get on there and you do your exercise. Then there's days where you're just powering, and you feel that change. And I think the same in the instructional level of Yiddishkeit. But it's not easy, and especially when you have children, right? Because children, especially when they're young, and I've been reminded of this, even as my children are not so young, but with our grandson, Shruly, Yisrael Avraham, now Seal, I guess, his new nickname. He woke up one day and decided his name was Seal. I was told. I didn't experience it was while they're still in Israel, but while they were there. So the nickname that I gave him that took hold with everybody, Shruly, has now been replaced with Seal. So they're very demanding, right? Because their mind is experiencing everything as a chiddush. So it's either can be frightful, exciting, frustrating. It has all those emotions, and the child, of course, doesn't have das yet. You know, das katnus, but not necessarily das elyon. And so it's hard to keep them occupied. And so many people, at least when I was growing up, a lot of my friends that I knew, Goyim and Yidden, would have television. So the parents would stick the kids in front of a cartoon. Wasn't allowed in my house. You either had a book open or you were outside playing. You just did not sit in front of a TV. And earlier than that, it was the radio. Now it was even before my time, although people still listen to a lot of radio back in my day. And now, of course, it's videos and phones and tablets, and you just stick it, and you can. And I'm guilty of it when I wanted to spend some time with Sui. So what was the easiest thing? Put them on my lap in the bed, and open up a Chabad children's video. Okay, so it was a better thing, but it was still a passive thing. If you go into the room next door, you'll see what my wife did. I mean, aside from the entire room is kind of built around Sruli and Chinuch, every play toy is a Chinuch thing. He has a little dollhouse, but it's not a dollhouse in this place. It's a Chabad house. And there's mitzvahs associated. There's an entire wall with what was the beginning of Aleph Beis Tanya, where he literally, many, many times, you would just see him walk by, especially as he was learning the Aleph Beis, and he knew words and he knew letters that associated with words, that he would stop and he would do his thing all on his own. But it requires someone who's prepared, my wife and his mother, prepared to sit with him and go through that day in and day out, so that there's an interaction, so that Chassidus and Torah is instructional, right? So when he's learning Aleph, he's learning about Ava. When he's learning the Ches, he's learning about Chesed. When he's learning Gimel for Gevurah, he's learning about strength and commitment. And all of these things tie into what I think is ultimately the value of Chassidus and Yiddishkeit Bechlal.
Do you remember that story I once told you? I read it in Esther Youngrice's book, where this woman was very, very depressed all her life, and she went to see Esther Youngrice and thought maybe somehow she could be inspired by her to get direction. What should she do? And Esther Youngrice asked her, when do you remember it started happening? So she remembers a story of her parents who always used to go to the Catskills. And one night, the night before the parents were about to leave, and they were usually with the nanny, she hears her mom on the phone very upset with the nanny and you can't, you have to come tomorrow. I have plane tickets, I have this, I have that. There's no way. You find me a substitute, or you're just never going to work for me again. So that same night, the woman says, oh, I found you someone. Okay, bring her tomorrow. So the lady comes the next day, and right before the lady comes, this girl, who was always depressed, was taken by her mother, collecting all the silver and the diamonds and whatever jewelry, and put it in.
Up until now, she hadn't been depressed, but after this,
right? Because she asked, Esther Youngrice asked, when did it all start? Can you remember? And so all of a sudden, this girl, witnessing her mom take all her precious gems and putting it into a safe and saying, you never can trust these people. Lock the key. That's why I'm putting it here. And then, bye, see you. And she stood there shocked, almost what? You're so worried about these precious gems and you're putting in the safe box, but what about me?
Right. She left her for the nanny.
And she left.
Right.
And so it did an impression on her that it like my own parents don't care about my safety, my protection, and they care more about the jewelry than me. So
powerful story. I repeated it many, many times.
you know, like so many times, even in the desire and the yearning and the longing to keep, you know, the finances going, to keep the children in yeshiva, and people are just so overtaxed, over busy because of having to make the ends meet, that the children get the short end of the stick. And, you know, in my life, and that's why I have always the chance in these get-togethers here to really thank you for, you know, the fact that you carried most of the burden, if not all of the burden, most of our life, and allowed me to homeschool.
Let me correct that. The fact is I carried the financial burden, but you carried the burden of chinuch, of kashrus, of shalom bayis, and what's more important, that those expensive jewelry that I could buy, or the car, or the house, or the children and their chinuch. So I think the story says it all. So if there's thanks, it's the other way around. But enough of this back and forth mutual praise.
Like really.
But the reality.
Because this is all this is in your schools. I always give you credit,
Right.
like, because if it wasn't for you allowing and giving me the freedom,
there's a lot of men who allow, and these things aren't produced, and the children don't get the kind of chinuch that our children got, or our grandson. But ultimately, the bottom line point is, and this is why I always come back to the meditations and the instructional lessons that my wife's work involves, whether it's a book or lecture or seminar, whatever it may be. Hasidus has got to be instructional and practical. If it isn't, it's not Hasidus. Plain and simple. As the Rebbe says over and over and over again, Hamaisa wa Iker. The Iker, the principal thing, is the deed, right? You can have a good machshava. Oh, I love my wife, I love my children, I want to just provide, and I want a holy home. You can have dibor. Oh, I love you kids, I love you, my dear. Let's all be good Torah Yidden, you know, learn your Torah. But if the Maisa isn't there, if the children don't see you with the Tanya open, if the children don't see you going off to shul, coming back from shul, they don't see you in shul, they don't, if they don't see you practicing what it is being preached to them, whether you're preaching or not, then it's going to ultimately result in that period of time when children are adolescents and they have the keenest sense of tzviyut, of hypocrisy. They can smell hypocrisy a mile away. And that you have to teach them, that Hasidus is for me as much as it is for you. It's instructional. I fall short, but I can use Hasidus instructionally to help get myself on the right path again. And it's a minute by minute, day by day, week by week, month by month process. You know, the Rebbe brought out an Asicha that I was learning a couple months ago. Seems like it was a couple months ago. I think I was learning it out a little bit with Rabbi Naftali Greenberg, who's a big mechanech and davens in our shul, is a real tzaddik, a real chassid. And the Rebbe was pointing out that the natural world, right, days and lunar months and solar years are cyclical because they allow us to realign, to do a reset, right? So if, no matter how bad things get or how bad one thinks they are, at the end of the day, we talked about this last week, you have Kriyat Shema L'Mita, you have the opportunity to think about those angels that you created going up, and all the missed opportunities of angels that could have gone up.
You were listening.
Of course I was.
Of course.
And then in the morning they come back down into your tefillas, and then your remote after tefillas. Really add to that next day. So you had a reset at night, and the next day allows you, upon awakening and washing and modani, a fresh start. Whatever happened yesterday, there had to be some mitzvahs, because we know that every Jew is like a rimon full of mitzvahs, chuyos. So there obviously was some good that day, that whatever good there was, and we don't say you create devils. You don't create the hefech. Okay, it was a missed opportunity, it could have been much better, but it's not a negative thing, it's only a positive thing. So whatever happened good yesterday, that you did your cheshbon nefesh on Kriyat Shema Amita, with the angels going up the Suam, the ladder, and that next day starts with Tosefet Erech. It starts with the value added from the day before, and nothing but value added. No deficits, no chisroinos, so that it can be new. And the same with the lunar month, and the same with the solar year. And then what happens? The entire Ganze Olam, think about this. Every single civilization that exists today abides by the Torah week. They might, as the Neutron did, change it from Shabbos to Sunday, but the fact is there's no rational basis. None. There's no solar event. There's no planetary event that creates a week. It's either entirely made up by Jews in the Torah, or it's what the Eibishter commanded in Bereshis. 6 days you work, commemorating the 6 days of creation. The seventh day you rest, representing the Shabbos that I rested in my creations. And that gives you the most powerful reset, right? So coming up is the Goyish New Year's, as they say in Israel, Sylvester, right? Isn't that what they call it?
Yeah, I have no idea they chose that.
Huh?
Why did they choose that?
I have no idea. And so what do people do? They make a New Year's resolution. I'm going to get fit. I'm going to, do this. I'm going to do that. And that's a positive thing. And we do it come Tishrei, right? And of course we have lots of Rosh Hashanahs. Rosh Hashanah of the Elanos, of the trees, Rosh Hashanah of the fruits. So we have these opportunities to reset and restart. And the essence of that opportunity is the ikar. It's not just speech or thought. It's actually applying it daily. And I just come back to this. If even adults, if you don't have time to do chitas, to do your Tanya learning daily, go through one ois a day. One ois a day. Very little there in terms of how much pages there's for Aleph, for example. Aside from it being beautifully done.
No, I can't believe the way this art is. Genius,
So,
godly hands.
You have
Like
your Aleph,
better than my wildest
your Aleph
dreams.
page,
So vibrant.
and it starts
also.
by connecting it to just a word. So a child learns an Aleph, and if it's not a Hebrew-speaking child, an English speaker, because this is geared toward that. God willing, there'll be a Hebrew version. But
And
the
then,
child learns Ahava, is love. When you turn the page, all of a sudden, love becomes instructional because it goes through. Ahava means love. It's a gift from Hashem. In other words, connecting your love with the Eibishter's love and bringing it to the Shema and doing the mitzvahs. And then Avraham Avinu. and that Hashem and loves us as His children. And love is an inheritance that we got from the Eibishter. And as we started this whole day off with, from the Tanya, Ki karoiv eilecho hadover ma'oid. This is very close to you. Even though it can seem far. There's a farness and a closeness. Anyway, it is just an absolutely wonderful book.
Oh, thank you. Wow.
So it's another 10 minutes. What do you want to talk about?
Well, I would like to continue this theme of like, in actuality, really putting the effort to do whatever you can to make your relationship work. So there's a story of this. He actually lived in Crown Heights, and Yossi Jacobson told this story in one of his. He had these like not CDs but tapes back then, and in the tape it was called "My Captain, Your Captain," or something like that. I don't know if you remember those
I
stories.
remember that.
And one of the stories that I heard there, that till this day, like when I think of self-sacrifice, I think about this story. This man was in a cargo, and it was freezing cold. It was, it was an open rooftop cargo, like animals were taken, but it was in the dead of winter in the night, and they had these like barely flimsy pajamas that they round them up to take them to the next destination, the next concentration camp. And there was this man, and he was like very, very demanding of him to massage him and to warm his body up. And he just wanted to go to sleep. He was so frostbitten. He was so cold. He just, every time he had a little dozed off, the man would push him, wake him up and say, warm me, warm me. And he was so frustrated. He was so annoyed, but he couldn't say no. And so he kept warming him throughout the night, falling asleep for a second, and then again, woken up. And he did that throughout the night. All of a sudden it was daybreak, and he could see the whole cargo. Everybody was dead, except the man he warmed and himself. And Rabbi Jacobson was sharing this as an inspiration that, like in life, sometimes you think you're doing extra for your spouse, you think you're doing extra for them, you think, like, you don't even understand that everything you're doing, ultimately, the good that you're doing, the extra mile you're doing, the extra self-sacrifice to make sure that your children get your attention and get the time and the love, and that your husband, feels your warmth and your thankfulness and your gratefulness, and you go the extra mile, even maybe it's not like you think you're doing way more than him, but you do it, you think you're doing it for them, well, think again, that it's also really bringing out your spiritual qualities, bringing out the blessings in your own life, and it definitely not only boomerangs back to you in a greater force that you could ever imagine, but it's something that if you could just like switch your thoughts about that, then you'll be able to more give of yourself and do a little more self-sacrifice for all of your relationships.
By the way, it predates your time, but you probably know the expression, and it almost sounds in contemporary times where everybody's a victim and everybody wants somebody to do something for them as opposed to doing for someone else. President Kennedy, God rest his soul.
What can America do for you, like that?
Yeah. Don't ask what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. And at the time, that was almost earth-shattering because we were literally on the cusp of the 60s generation, the hippies, the entirely self-centered look of, I should be able to do anything I want that makes me feel good. And it was a very self-centered time. even as it was a revolutionary time, which would suggest it was outward looking, but in reality it was very self-looking. And that's the same concept, right? If we spend less time, and you talked about this, I think, early on in one of our early marriage dialogues, but it's in your book on marriage to be sure, which is that, you know, if you stop looking at your spouse as someone who's not doing for you, and just think, what can I add and do for my spouse? And it's the same concept, right? Instead of inward looking at what I want, it's outward doing, right? I've got plenty of good machshavas, and I can talk a good game, you know, one would think as a lawyer. But the question is, am I doing the ma'aseh? Am I doing the deed? Am I following through? And I think we both have the opportunity, and you can, I think you can test this if you're, as we are, with adult children, and one of our children is married with our grandson. When push comes to shove, if you can turn to your children or to your spouse and say, haven't I always been there for you? Right? If you can do that honestly and then know that they're going to respond yes, right? You can have moments of, God forbid, anger. You can have moments of you know, self-indulgence. But if they know that when they needed you, you were there for them, whether it was in their chinuch or just to hold them, whatever it may be, that is a powerful, powerful place to be in a relationship. Because a relationship, I will tell you, and this is from experience, after 35 years of marriage,
almost 6.
in the 36th year, and a son who's 27.
Yeah. We all have the same 7. You're 67. I'm 57.
In my 60th year,
Mm-hmm.
and the 28th year.
Yeah.
And a daughter who's 3 years younger than he. That when they know, and you know, that you're always, you have been a stable platform that has always reached out to do for them when they needed it, right? Then no matter what happens in the relationship, you're on solid footing. Because betrayal doesn't have to be the ultimate betrayal. Betrayal can simply be when that child is needing something. The great story by the Alter Rebbe and even by the Mitzvah Rebbe, right?
Story?
Right? Where the Mitzvah Rebbe, I believe it was, someone
with
correct
the
me.
hole in the wall?
No, it was
in the
the
ground?
Mitzvah Rebbe was deep in learning,
Oh, and he didn't pay attention to the
and
crying
his child,
baby.
the
Oh,
Tzemach said
yeah.
was crying,
Yeah.
and the Alter Rebbe was also doing his own holy thing. But the Alter Rebbe got up
Yeah.
and tended to the Tzemach Tzedek, his grandson, and then, as it were, reminded his son
Yeah.
that when your child is crying, when your child needs you, it doesn't matter what you do. If your learning Torah is going to supplant what that child needs at that moment, it isn't Torah. It's something else. You're not creating shalom. You're not engaging in the deed. It's a self-centered, I'm hopping this intellectually. And I think that at the end of the day, having gone back over the marriage book, Reaching New Heights, Kindness in Marriage, that's the ultimate lesson. That's what I saw throughout the book.
Yeah, we were debating different publishers, editors, you know, what the title of the book would be. And at one point I wanted the book to be called Love Prevails. But then as people were giving me suggestions that like, but what's the main like, what are you trying to pushing, you know, what agenda, what is it that you're trying to convey? Yes, you want them to have the love prevail, but how? And so we switched it to kindness in marriage, because that's how your love will prevail.
And it's underscored by the name of the series, Reaching New Heights, right? Because you can understand that as lagia, to reach Raimus, right? Chadoshus. But it's a constant thing. It doesn't say, you know, like the typical self-help guru book that wants to become a New York Times bestseller, and there's one every week. You would think that if all these books, which are so successful in selling, teach you how to be healthy, how to have a great love life, a great family life, a great work life, you know, there's all these books, and every week there's a new self-help book, and every week it's a New York Times bestseller, and I guess the same people that bought that book because it was just words on paper have to go buy the next book because that panacea didn't work, right? It's a promise of a panacea. Reaching New Heights, and we talked about this at the time when coming to that name, that it's an ongoing thing. You're always reaching, and there's always new heights, right? Even for the tzaddik, right? For me, it's an up and down. One day I'm up, next day I'm down, I got to get back up. But a tzaddik, every new height, there's no real Eureka in a true tzaddik's behavior, but there's a constant elevation. But interestingly enough, as we know in Chassidus, and the Indian of the river, right, to actually, and you speak about this in one of your lectures, in order to go up to a next level, there almost has to be a bit of a step back, a Yerida with Sorachaliya, because you got to spring, and the only way you spring is if you're engaging in almost a backward movement, so you can recoil and go forward.
The backward movement motivates you now because of the disappointment or the challenge that you have in having failed, or that motivates you. And if you don't have any motivation,
so we've reached my hard stop. I'll let you continue. You have the Zoom, and for everyone who wants, you can get on Zoom, and we record it as well.
Yeah,
but I don't
I
know
see if there's any questions. I see someone on the chat. You want to read there? What does it say?
No questions on the chat.
No, it said there was, but okay.
Oh, it's right here. Here's the chat.
Didn't I put? Oh.
That's what I see.
Okay, no question.
Okay.
All right, blessings.
See you next week, God willing.
And yeah, thank you. Thank you for joining. Shabbat Tov. Blessed week. Bye-bye. I don't even know if this Instagram worked, but I'm going to try.